Well, no joiners so far today, but we will begin in 120, Unit 6, dealing with inner ear physiology. This particular Zoom session continues hot on the heels of last week's inner ear anatomy, which was Unit 5. We spent 2 weeks on inner ear anatomy, and now we are spending 2 weeks on inner ear physiology. So let's count down the weeks again. I think we did a week of overview. Like we covered the whole ear from stem to stern, outer to the brain, just about. That was our first lesson. Then we had outer ear anatomy and physiology for 1 week. Then we spent 2 weeks on the middle ear. And now we're spending 4 weeks on the inner ear. Hello, Richard. He weighs in. You haven't missed anything. Just been reviewing what we've done, talking about what we did over the course of the semester. So 2 weeks on the middle ear we spent, 1 week on the outer ear only, and now 4 weeks, though, in the inner ear. So you can see, like a snake that's just eaten a mouse, there's a great big bump, okay? And that's where we are right now, the inner ear. Physiology of the inner ear. Not what it is, but what it does. Anatomy is what it is, the form. Physiology is how it works, the function. And in 110, just a little over an hour ago, we were talking about motion inside of the cochlea. I was talking to you. You saw this orange-shaped ripple that we described, how it was rounded and not sharpened. Okay, well that's the kind of stuff we're going into today. So let's go and look at share screen here, and we'll look at our notes. Here's hoping we've all got them printed up. Gotta have them, or we can't even go forward. We're looking at the inner ear physiology, Unit 6. There's your readings out of Chapter 3, Lassen-Woodford, pages 80 to 92. But when we describe everything about the inner ear physiology, it's all about something called the traveling wave. And the traveling wave is that orange-shaped ripple that you saw in 110 earlier today. And we'll take a lot more of a look at that in this week and next week. The traveling wave is a ripple that takes place in the cochlea due to stimulation from the middle ear. So as you recall, the outer ear gathering sound, the middle ear changing or transducing that sound into mechanical piston-like energy. And then the inner ear has two transductions or changes. It changes the mechanical energy from the middle ear into hydraulic ripple wave energy called the traveling wave. And then the hair cells inside the cochlea change that hydraulic ripple energy into electricity. And electricity is the language your brain runs on and understands. So the purpose of the vestibular system is to give the brain information regarding the position of your body in space. The purpose of your inner ear, the cochlea, is to transduce mechanical energy into electrical energy so that it can be understood by the brain. And break that down into two changes. One is changing the mechanical energy into hydraulic ripple energy, and then changing that hydraulic ripple energy into electrical energy. Hair cells, oh, look what it says here. I think we covered this even last week. Are pilloried mechanoreceptors. Pilloried. Let's look at that word, pilloried. And we've all heard of Thanksgiving Day. In the States, yours is coming up. In Canada, we had ours already in the first week of October. Okay? Thanksgiving Day, the Mayflower, the Pilgrims, the witches, Massachusetts, all the stuff, okay, with the big buckles and the hats and the boots and the pilloried. When the bad people were put in these stockets, so their heads and their hands stuck out like this and people got to throw tomatoes at them, pilloried. Your head is stuck and separate from your body. Not cut off, but it's sealed, okay? So think of my head as the hairs on the hair cells and my body below as the cell underneath the hairs, okay? And remember, they are separated. The hairs are in contact with endolymph, and the cell bodies are in contact with the fluid called cortilymph. And you remember, cortilymph is perilymph inside the scala media. So if you think of perilymph as the fluid that's in the scala vestibuli and the scala tympani, and you wonder how the hair cells can get access to two different kinds of fluid, just like a battery has two different kinds of material to create a charge, okay? How does the hair cell, if it's only an endolymph, how is it going to create electricity? The reason is that there is an area inside the organ of Corti, which is all the supporting cells and the hair cells inside the scala media. The hair cell bodies themselves are surrounded by perilymph, which is called cortilymph inside the scala media. And the hairs themselves are in contact with endolymph. Never forget that. That was last week. So now we're looking here, share screen. Pilloried mechanoreceptors. Pilloried, they're like a hybrid between a nerve cell and a skin cell. So what part of the embryologic tissue would they come from? Endolymph. I should say ectoderm. There you go, ectoderm. Ectoderm, mesoderm, endoderm. Ectoderm, skin and nerve tissues. Mesoderm, muscle and bone tissue. Endoderm, slimy guts tissue. In the original embryonic disc inside of mummy, soon after conception, 3 layers of embryonic tissue that will eventually turn into the various parts of our body. So hair cells are kind of like a hybrid between a nerve cell and a skin cell. Pilloried because they are fixed and tied around their necks. Inner hair cells are afferent. They send all info to the brain. Outer hair cells are efferent. The cell bodies stretch and shorten to help the inner hair cells sense soft sounds. Remember the picture, the moving motion shot I showed just over an hour ago in 110 Acoustics, Unit 5? There we go. Let's read this paragraph, written by someone who is quite famous in the field. All sounds entering the cochlea, and sounds really don't enter the cochlea, do they? Sound waves create piston mechanical energy in the middle ear, and the middle ear activates the cochlea. So never think that sound waves go into the cochlea. They don't. Sound waves go to the eardrum, and now they are changed into mechanical energy by the middle ear. So no longer do you have any sound waves. It's mechanical piston-like energy, which creates ripples inside the cochlea. Here we go. All sound waves, why don't you just say activating the cochlea, create a traveling wave, a ripple wave along the basilar membrane. What's the basilar membrane? The floor upon which the hair cells stand. It's the orange ripple that I showed you in 110, and we'll see it again here. The ripple along the basilar membrane, which goes from the base to the apex. These waves travel way slower than sound does in air, taking several milliseconds to complete a journey of a few millimeters over the sensory hair cells. Each individual frequency component wave, yes, you get different waves for different frequencies, grows in intensity as it travels, gets bigger in height as it travels, finally reaching a peak where it stops. Okay? As it travels, a peak before coming to a complete stop at some unique place on the basilar membrane. So the wave goes from the base to the apex of the cochlea, getting bigger, bigger, bigger until it stops at some unique place along the basilar membrane. If it stops at the base, you hear a high frequency sound. If it stops in the middle, you hear a mid frequency sound. And if it stops at the apex, you hear a low frequency sound. That was written by a man by the last name of Kemp. Kemp, circle the name. He discovered otoacoustic emissions. Oto, ear, acoustic, sound, emissions coming out of the cochlea. Weird. Weird. And sound waves coming out of the cochlea are created by the outer hair cells. We'll talk more about them next week and later, not now, but they are a byproduct of the outer hair cells working hard. We'll look more at this later. Circle the name, though. We'll go back to it later. Another name you need to know is von Beckersey. Von Beckersey was the one who won a Nobel Prize for modernizing traveling wave concepts. So he discovered more about how the traveling wave worked in the cochlea soon after World War II. He was a Hungarian researcher who fled Nazi-occupied Europe, came to the United States, and became a researcher at Harvard University. And he actually won a Nobel Prize. His views were held firmly and not questioned until the 1980s. And they were questioned by a man named Gould. Gould suspected outer hair cell action. Von Beckersey did not. Gould and von Beckersey argued. Von Beckersey won, saying he won the Nobel Prize. Gould went away. But later on, Kemp exonerated Gould. Kemp proved that Gould was right in that the outer hair cells did something very important. Okay? We'll come back to it. Whoa, 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 not that far, Ted. Geez, crazy. Okay. Okay, how does the traveling wave work? So now it's time for some pictures. Okay, here's a man you got to circle as well, von Helmholtz. You've heard his name once before, probably last week in psychoacoustics, okay, and maybe last week in anatomy. He discovered that the cochlea was tonotopic. Remember that word, tonotopic. T-O-N-O-T-O-P-I-C. Specific frequencies are represented in specific places. Just like keys on a piano. Just like the last picture I showed you in acoustics class an hour ago. Okay? High frequencies located at the base, low frequencies located at the apex. That was von Helmholtz. This is von Beckersey. He discovered the traveling wave. Okay, in other words, he discovered, oh, the traveling wave activates hair cells at the base of the cochlea, then you hear a high frequency sound. The traveling wave activates the apex of the cochlea, now you hear a low frequency sound. So von Helmholtz just discovered that the cochlea was tonotopic. Von Beckersey went further and discovered how the traveling waves in the cochlea activated the hair cells. He even won a Nobel Prize. There you see a picture of a cochlea and 3 semicircular canals, and you can see the word down the right side, Sveriga, which is the Swedish word for Sweden. Sveriga. George von Beckersey, Nobel Prize, 1961, for discovering the traveling wave. Here's another picture of von Beckersey. And there's a picture of his colleague, Gould, who disagreed with him. Read it here. Thomas Gould, ahead of his time. If the term ahead of their time applied to anyone in auditory research, it was Gould. Gould is widely celebrated as a cosmologist, geophysicist, and original thinker with major contributions to theories of the origin of the universe, the nature of pulsars, the physics of the magnetosphere, the extraterrestrial origins of life on Earth, and much more. But just a few years between 1945 and 1950, Gould was deeply engaged in state-of-the-art auditory research at the Physiology Department of Cambridge University in England. There he recorded fine frequency tuning of the primary auditory neurons and conducted penetrating psychoacoustic experiments on human frequency discrimination. Frequency resolution, the ability to distinguish frequencies close together, delta F, just noticeable difference, differential threshold. Hook it together like a crochet. Watch this. He boldly challenged von Beckesy's interpretation of cochlear mechanics. He was the first to describe an active cochlear process involving electromotile elements, outer hair cells, to make the cochlea's response bigger. And he was the first to predict and search for spontaneous otoacoustic emissions. Now, OAEs, otoacoustic emissions, think of them like a byproduct, just like sweat is a byproduct of working hard, just like heat is a byproduct of a lamp. Okay? It's not what you want the most, but it's a byproduct of it. Because the outer hair cells move and help the inner hair cells pick up soft sounds, they therefore emit a byproduct. And that's called OAEs. We'll talk more about it later. Here's a picture of a bunch of researchers. Here's Gould in the middle, facing the front. And Gould's work laid the foundation for the later investigations that demonstrated outer hair cell motility and otoacoustic emissions. Yeah, interesting. Here's a picture of David Kemp. Kemp, still living, okay? He proved Gould right. So here we go. Look at the cochlea. I'll make it bigger. Here's the motion of fluid that takes place in the cochlea. Okay? Because sound has entered the ear canal, sound has pushed the middle ear ossicles. The middle ear ossicles are now moving in a piston-like energy, pushing in and out of the oval window. And when you push in the oval window, what happens here? Scala vestibuli, fluid is pushed in. Follow the red arrow, red arrow, red arrow, red arrow, red arrow, and then down through the helicotrema, out the scala tympani, scala tympani, scala tympani, scala tympani, scala tympani, bulging the round window. So as the oval window, look to the right, is pushing in, it moves the fluid like this black arrow here, and then that motion goes down through, or that motion of fluid, through the helicotrema, and then out the green arrow, and this arrow here would bulge the round window. So you've got that trade-off of action. The oval window pushing in and the round window bulging out. If you pushed on the round window, the oval window would go out. Okay, so either way, you've got that inter-frickin' action. So that is what I call the horizontal movement of fluid. Okay, the black arrow here and the white arrow here. Or the red arrow here and the green arrows there. That's that back and forth movement, okay, that you need to have to activate the cochlea. So when the oval window pushes in, the round window bulges out. Similarly, if you pushed on the round window, the oval window would bulge out. Okay, that's the horizontal fluid motion. But looky, here comes Cookie. Look at this little arrow here. It's pushing down. These little black arrows. That's what I call the vertical movement. And so there, look at the bending of that wall. Reissner's membrane bends. Basilar membrane, right here, there's the basilar membrane. It bends too. And this vertical bending, that up and down bending, is the traveling wave. It's going to happen either at the base or at the middle or at the apex of the cochlea, wherever that bend takes place. So there's two actions, the horizontal movement and a vertical movement. Here's showing you sideways, if you can kink your head sideways, okay? Gets a little odd. Whoops. I'll go back here. Let's see if I can escape. Maybe I can grab this thing and turn it. That would be kind of wild. Let's see if I can do that. And turn this guy like so, okay? And now bring it closer. There you go. Again, the horizontal movement, the black and gray arrows, the vertical movement, the up and down movement. Here's how von Bekkesee drew it. Here's the stapes, footplate of the stapes, pushing in and out of the oval window. If you follow this dotted line, here's the unrolled cochlea. Okay, a little over an inch long. The oval window is this in black. It's pushing the fluid, and this is the horizontal movement. This arrow, follow my cursor, pushing the fluid around the helicotrema, which would then push the fluid this way and push the round window out. So when the oval window pushes in, the round window would bulge out. But now look at the dashed lines here. You've got this bending action here. Okay? That, if you took a cross section, look at this slice right here, and if you could turn the cochlea so you can see inside of it, okay, you take a slice and turn it sideways, this is what you're seeing. Scala vestibuli, scala media, where the hair cells are, scala tympani. Reissner's membrane bends, the basilar membrane bends, and the hair cells, right where I'm moving my cursor, become activated. So if that bend takes place in the middle of the cochlea, you hear a mid-frequency sound. If that bend takes place here, you hear a low-frequency sound. And if it takes place here, you hear a high-frequency sound. This is the traveling wave. Okay, the traveling wave. Now here's a picture from some nursing textbook. Here's the cochlea rolled up, and here's the cochlea unrolled. And the black is the scala media, the top here, scala vestibuli, the bottom here, scala tympani. Back to the scala vestibuli, this is what's communicating with the oval window, and the oval window pushes. Fluid is pushed, follow my cursor. Helicotrema, la 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 la, which then bends, pushes out here, and bulges the round window. Okay, the black and gray area here, scala media, hair cell region. Follow my cursor. Okay, the cochlea, read with me, consists of a coiled, bony canal with a membranous tube inside. B. So A, they're showing you here. B, the cochlea is unwound. The membranous tube is seen ending as a closed sac at the apex of the bony canal. Okay, that's boring. And this is a picture showing you how the cochlea is tonotopic. I mean, this is out of your anatomy as well. The base of the cochlea, high frequency sounds. The middle of the cochlea, mid-frequency sounds. The apex of the cochlea, low-frequency sounds. Okay? A schematic illustration of how a complex sound waveform, left, is decomposed into its constituent frequency components, right, by the basilar membrane. The appropriate locations or approximate locations on the basilar membrane that are vibrating with these patterns are shown in the center. Here's another picture showing you again how the cochlea is tonotopic, with high frequencies toward the base and low frequencies toward the apex. Now, let's look at our typed writing, and let's talk about, in writing now, what you have in your notes is exactly what I've been describing verbally while showing you the slides. So, let me have a sip of my coffee here. Billy. Okay, how does the traveling wave work? Horizontal and vertical motions in the cochlea cause inner hair cell stereocilia to bend or shear at some location. The bent or sheared stereocilia causes a neural message to be sent from the inner hair cells along the 8th nerve to the brain stem. Horizontal movement results in vertical movement, which is the traveling wave. Horizontal, by way of the oval window to helicotrema to the round window. The vertical is the indentation of Reissner's membrane and basilar membranes, the walls of the scala media. Reissner's membrane, basilar membrane. Reissner's membrane, basilar membrane. Horizontal movement, vertical movement. Back to the notes. How does a vertical movement result from the horizontal movement? Why does this bend? How come that bends? If I'm pushing fluid here, why on earth does that cause a vertical motion to occur somewhere along the basilar membrane? How come if I'm pushing fluid here, why does that cause a vertical ripple here? The answer, my fine feathered friends, is because look at how the cochlea is wider at the base and narrower at the apex. This means that the motion of fluid is constricted into a narrower area. See that? And it has to go through this wee little thin channel. Okay, so you've built up a pressure of fluid. Because you've built up a pressure of fluid, there's got to be some give. Especially, look at this black line. The black line here is IS, capital S, is this triangular area. Okay? They're just showing you as a schematic. So when you've got a buildup of pressure here, you've got to have an indentation, because remember the basilar, I should say the membranous labyrinth, scala media, is the membranous labyrinth. Its walls are soft, squishy, squishy. They're just membranes. They're not bone. Okay? The bone is here, where my cursor is. That's bone. This is bone. All the stuff around here is bone. But these walls here are membranes. So if I've got a buildup of pressure in the scala vestibuli, there's going to be some give. And that give, if this foot plate of the stapes is going really fast, that's a high frequency, and the indentation will occur here. If this foot plate of the stapes is going not very fast, it's a low frequency sound, and the indentation will occur over here. That's the way to understand it. So now back to our notes. How does this happen? Cochlear fluids, perilymph, can't be compressed much. So as the stapes footplate moves in, the round window bulges out. The scala media displacement, the vertical movement, occurs due to the narrow helicotrema. As the stapes is pushed into the oval window, the narrow helicotrema resists movement through it. Perilymph pressure increases in the scala vestibuli. This pushes the scala media, Reissner's membrane and basilar membranes, down toward the scala tympani. As the stapes moves out of the oval window, the narrow helicotrema resists movement through it again. Perilymph pressure increases in the scala tympani, pushing the scala media up toward the scala vestibuli. So this, now we're looking at the stapes unrolled and cross-section, and that's exactly what we looked at in our PowerPoints now. So let's read it. Highest amplitude of the wave indents the whole cochlear duct. The cochlear duct is the scala media, okay, at some specific point, at the base, at the middle, at the apex, but it's much easier to illustrate only basilar membrane movement. That's why most people just look at the basilar membrane, the floor upon which the hair cells stand. So you can look at this black line here as this. That's the floor upon which the hair cells stand. So indentation will shear the stereocilia at some particular place along the basilar membrane. The mechanical vibratory pattern of the basilar membrane is very stable. Changing the fluids, the position of the stapes, elasticity of the round window, all of that stuff does not alter the basilar membrane's mechanical characteristics, which is, as you will recall, narrower at the base, less mass and more stiff, and wider toward the apex, more mass, less stiff. So the whole cochlear duct, the organ of Corti, the whole scala media gets wider toward the narrow apex of the cochlea, and it's narrower toward the wide base of the cochlea. And that's how the cochlea is tonotopic, because mass resonates with low frequency sounds, stiffness resonates with highs. The traveling wave will stop at the apex of the cochlea, then you hear a low frequency sound. So low frequencies cause traveling waves that will resonate, literally, the apex of the cochlea, the basilar membrane at the apex of the cochlea. High frequencies cause sounds that will resonate, will cause a traveling wave at the base of the cochlea. All sounds, they start out at the base, but they either stop at the base, or they start from the base and they stop in the middle, or they start at the base and they stop at the apex. But anyway, they all start at the base of the cochlea. I mean, look at this. This is, the movement is happening here, toward here, toward here. So that's going to be significant later on. But recall, the basilar membrane is wide and flaccid at the narrow apex. More mass, less stiff. Basilar membrane is narrower and more stiff at the wide base of the cochlea. Less mass, more stiff. High frequency traveling wave stimulates basal high frequency hair cells. In other words, causes a traveling wave that stops at the base. Low frequency traveling wave stimulates apical hair cells. So in other words, it's a longer traveling wave that terminates at the apex of the cochlea. Intensity affects the height or the size of the traveling wave. Textbooks exaggerate the motion of basilar membrane movement. Its movement is tiny. Von Beckesy had to stimulate the cochlea with 125 decibels to see its motion. And von Beckesy only had dead people. He had cadavers. And he would stimulate the dead person's ear with 120 dB to see anything. Okay, now I'm going to tell you a story here without looking at notes. Von Beckesy, Hungarian researcher, made a model of the cochlea, a great big model. It was, several feet tall. And it had an oval window and a round window, and he created a Reissner's membrane and a basilar membrane. So he made a whole model, a 3D model of the cochlea. And he would push the stapes footplate, and yes, it would create ripple patterns. And if he made a high frequency stimulus, yep, the traveling wave would kind of stop at the base. And if he made a low frequency stimulus hit the stapes, yeah, traveling wave would terminate at the apex of the cochlea. So it worked, but it didn't work very well. And he said to himself, let me take out the footplate of the stapes. I'm going to plug it into the round window. Just for fun. It's his model. He could do what he wanted. So he stuck the footplate of the stapes now in the round window. And he made the oval window just be like the round window. He just covered it with a membrane. And when he did this, his model worked way better. It worked just perfectly. And he said to himself, isn't that weird? Like, maybe did God make a mistake? Like, should the footplate of the stapes have been stuck in the round window instead of the oval window? Gould said to him, you're overlooking something here. Maybe the outer hair cells are doing something. Maybe the outer hair cells are amplifying the traveling wave. Remember, the outer hair cells are efferent. They take info from the brain. So mechanically, maybe they're working to increase the size of the traveling wave. And maybe because your model isn't incorporating this active component of the outer hair cells, maybe that's why the cochlea, your model doesn't work very well with the footplate of the stapes in the oval window. Okay, so this is there's history here. And Gould was proven to be right. And he was proven to be correct by Kemp, who decades later discovered otoacoustic emissions, which are a literal byproduct of the outer hair cells working their proverbial butts off. Okay? Just like sweat is a byproduct of work. Let's share screen again and read here. Traveling waves versus sound waves. Traveling waves do not resemble sound waves in air. Sound waves in air are longitudinal. Remember this from acoustics? They are a series of compressions and rarefactions of molecules. All right. Traveling waves, think of traveling waves themselves, though, they are like water waves. Okay, the up and down motion of a traveling wave is perpendicular to the direction in which it travels. So you just like waves of water, they're traveling from out in the water toward the shore, but the up and down motion of the wave is perpendicular to the direction in which the wave is traveling. That's called a transverse wave. So we draw sound waves as if they are transverse waves, but in all reality, they aren't transverse waves, are they? Okay? Now, traveling waves versus sound waves. I got to stop sharing here. I got to talk to you here, okay? How long is a 250 hertz tone? Wavelength is speed of sound over frequency. Frequency is speed of sound over wavelength. Well, we want wavelength. Wavelength is speed of sound over frequency. So wavelength is 340 meters per second divided by, say, 250 hertz. Let's do it. Get my calculator here. 340 divided by 250 hertz equals 1.36 meters. So 1.36 yards. How big is a yard? 3 feet. How big is 1.3 yards? A little bit more, 4.5 feet. So a 250 hertz tone is 4.5 feet long, its wavelength. How long is the cochlea when you unroll it? The cochlea has 2.5 coils, doesn't it? It's as big as your pinky finger, the tip of your pinky. So when you unroll the cochlea, it's a little bit more than 1 inch long. It's about 3 centimeters long. What's a centimeter? The width of my fingernail. So it's 3 fingernails long. How is a 250 hertz tone that's 4.5 feet long, how is that going to enter a cochlea? The fact of the matter is it doesn't. Sound waves don't enter a cochlea. Sound waves activate a cochlea, creating traveling waves. But traveling waves are a different animal than sound waves. Sound waves are lions and traveling waves are tigers. They're both waves, but they're different animals. Okay, they can't breed, they're different animals. Okay, so sound waves are longitudinal. They are a series of compression and rarefactions of molecules. Traveling waves are transverse waves. They really do go up and down. Okay, so traveling waves are created by sound waves. And how? Sound waves hit the eardrum. The middle ear changes sound waves into mechanical piston-like energy. And the cochlea takes that mechanical piston-like energy and creates traveling waves. And the traveling waves activate hair cells, either at the base or the middle at the apex. And that determines the frequency of sound that you're going to hear. So traveling waves are indirectly created by sound waves, but rest assured, sound waves do not enter a cochlea. So that's what I'm trying to highlight in that middle section here, page 2. Traveling waves versus sound waves. Read with me. Traveling waves do not resemble sound waves in air. Think of steady state, steady intensity, pure tone. Its peaks are all the same in amplitude. Resulting traveling wave, however, has one peak that stimulates specific places of hair cells. Recall from acoustics, sound waves are longitudinal. Their condensations and rarefactions go in the same plane as the direction of the wave itself. Traveling waves are transverse waves, like water waves. Their up and down motions occur perpendicular to the direction of the wave itself. Always remember, sound does not enter the cochlea. Instead, sound activates the cochlea. Incoming longitudinal sound waves cause internal transverse cochlear traveling waves. Think about it. A 250 hertz tone has a wavelength of 4.5 feet. The unrolled cochlea is about 1 inch long. There's no way a 250 hertz tone can enter a cochlea. Traveling waves interact with the mass and stiffness properties of the basilar membrane, resulting in peaks that occur at specific places along the basilar membrane. The cochlea is tonotopic. Specific frequencies are represented in specific places. Let's go a little further now and look at the traveling waves at how they are asymmetrical. They are asymmetrical. In English, what does this mean? Let's looky. Here's a picture again of horizontal movement resulting in up and down movement, but we've been there. And this is another picture showing you how horizontal movement in blue turns into an indentation. Look at the indentation here or here, okay? That's all it's telling you. Another picture showing you again the horizontal movement through the narrow helicotrema. You've got an indentation happening here or an indentation happening here. Your traveling wave might be here. Your traveling wave might be here. Now, the traveling wave is going to cause these hair cells to be sheared. Look at what happened. The basilar membrane and everything bent. So when you've got this bending, the hairs are stuck between two things. They've got a floor and a ceiling. So when you've done this, here, I'll show it to you. Don't think of the scala media as a triangle doing this, okay? Think of it as you've got Reissner's membrane happening here, basilar membrane, or I should say the tectorial membrane happening here, and the hair cells here, and you've got a shearing motion. If I had strings between my fingers, you'd see what I mean, okay? Very important to look at that picture, the shearing action. See how the hairs here got bent? And they got bent because of that traveling wave. Because of that indentation, because of the indentation, because of the indentation. You can see the tectorial membrane, I'll bring it closer. Tectorial membrane here, hair cells in here, and the hairs right where my cursor is. And so this indentation is going to cause that shearing action. We'll look more at that next week. Here, oh yeah, here's another picture. Tectorial membrane, basilar membrane, hair cell bodies. All of this would be cortolymph here. Hair cell hairs or stereocilia here. Endolymph, where my cursor is, all surrounding the hairs. Cortolymph, surrounding the bodies of the hair cells themselves. And think of the two hinges. One hinge, another hinge. At rest at the bottom, and at the top, the shearing action. Okay, now, let's look at the shape of the traveling wave. Look at the shape. See how it's shaped like a kite? Here's the base of the cochlea, apex of the cochlea, and the black line, just think of as the basilar membrane. They're just looking at one of they can't draw all of this. So what they're trying to do is just show you that the ripple, okay, the traveling wave, if it's a high frequency sound, it moves here and stops here. See the peak of the traveling wave? See the outline of the traveling wave? That's called the traveling wave envelope. The traveling wave envelope. So here's the basilar membrane, this black the whole black line. High frequency hair cells on the left, lows on the right. If it's a high frequency sound that's stimulating the cochlea, the traveling wave will move a bit here and will peak here, because high frequencies are going to resonate with this area. Okay? If it's a lower frequency sound, the traveling wave will begin but will end more apically. But once again, you still have an asymmetrical shape. Notice how the steep part always faces north. north, faces the apex. And the longer tail slopes toward Kalamazoo, toward the base. Okay? Remember that shape, like a kite, with the steep end facing the apex, the shallow end facing the base. Here's another picture. I like this picture. Look at it. Here's, you're showing the cochlea. Here the cochlea is unrolled. And notice how the basilar membrane gets wider toward the narrow apex. So call this whole big tube here the scala media. Okay? So basically this, what you're showing here is the basilar membrane gets wider and wider toward the apex. A high frequency sound will make a ripple here. A lower frequency sound will make the ripple happen here. And lower will cause the ripple to occur more and more apically. Here's another picture showing the same thing. Ear canal on the right. Eardrum, right where I'm drawing my cursor. Malleus, incus, stapes, oval window. I love these semicircular canals. Anyway, scala vestibuli will cause a traveling wave. Okay, the motion will, the traveling wave will be here. A mid-frequency sound activating the cochlea will cause a traveling wave here. A high-frequency sound activating the cochlea will cause a traveling wave here. But note again, the traveling waves are asymmetrical. The envelopes are shaped like kites. Very important. Here's another one, just emphasizing that. Okay, here what we're doing is just showing the envelopes. Not this slide. Here they're in the dashed line, but here they're just showing the envelopes. Note the asymmetrical shapes. Always note the asymmetrical shapes because it has a reason. There is a reason for the season of everything. And I'll get to it in just a bit. Here's a whole bunch of traveling waves. From the word information. Here, information. So look at this. Hold your hand to your throat. Low frequency sound. Notice the traveling waves are toward the apex. This is the base. This is the apex. And going down is time, showing you what's happening in the cochlea over time. Look where I'm circling. So in vowel sounds, traveling waves closer to the apex. High frequency sound. For, may, all the sounds that wiggle the larynx are longer traveling waves terminating more toward the apex of the cochlea. Information. Okay? So you've got all these rippling traveling waves going up and down, up and down, up and down the cochlea rapidly, going like snake, just like nuts. We finished today's discussion with something called the upward spread of masking that has everything to do with the asymmetrical traveling wave. Okay? But note again, these traveling waves are all asymmetrical. Every stinking one of them. Notice how the front, facing the apex, is more steep. The tail is more shallow. Same here. Okay? Base, apex, basilar membrane, low frequency traveling wave in orangish red, high frequency traveling wave in light blue. So read with me. It says upward spread of masking. Intense low frequency traveling wave moves the entire basilar membrane, but the peak is toward the apex. Intense high frequency traveling wave moves the basilar membrane only at the base. But by gum, they're both shaped like kites. Now, on top of the envelopes is the sharpening of the traveling waves done by the outer hair cells. We'll talk more about this next week, but each traveling wave, and we talked a little bit about this in acoustics class a couple of hours ago. Okay, showing you that when you've got outer hair cell action, your traveling wave is bigger and it's also sharper, meaning this guy can distinguish between frequencies close together. This guy can't. Okay, but we'll talk more about that next week. This guy has better frequency resolution, better just noticeable difference than this person does. Anyway, the point I'm trying to drive home is this, right here. Suppose you have the loud rumbling of a truck outside your house. Blah, 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 blah. It's making low frequency traveling waves in your cochlea. And then you have a canary in your kitchen, softly peeping. Beep, 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 some treble sound. The loud rumbling of a truck, look at the traveling wave. Its shape, it will easily cover the soft peeping of a canary. Okay? Remember, the amplitude of the wave is the height. So here would be a loud canary. Okay? Here would be a soft canary. So the loud rumbling of a truck can cover up the traveling wave of a soft, high-pitched sound. But it doesn't work the other way around. The soft rumbling of a truck outside, Miss Hairy Canary can beep, 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 beep all she wants, but her traveling wave ain't going out to the left. Okay, it's going to be bigger, but it's confined to the base. Whereas the truck, when it gets louder, its tail, the traveling wave tail of its kite shape, can easily cover up the traveling wave of a peeping of a canary. All this means is that low frequencies mask or cover high frequencies better than high frequencies cover or mask low frequencies. What is the upshot of that? It's called the upward spread of masking. Low frequency sounds can cover up soft high frequency sounds better than loud high frequency sounds can cover up soft low frequency sounds. And the reason why is because of the shape of the traveling wave in your cochlea. It's asymmetrical. What does this have to do with your field? Everything. What's the main complaint of hearing aid wearers? Background noise. What's background noise? Mostly low frequency. What sounds do they want to hear the most? Speech. And what parts of speech tell the differences in the words? The consonants, the high frequency consonants. S, sh, f. Remember that in acoustics? Unit 3, complex sounds. Background noise is the bull in the china shop. The china teacups are the high frequency consonants. Background noise easily masks or covers the high frequency consonants. And so the person wearing hearing aids is listening to the high frequencies of speech, but background noise can so easily cover it that it isn't funny. Another thing to take home before we sign off today is the fact that most hearing loss involves damage to the outer hair cells. And when you've got damage to the outer hair cells, you have lost. Whoa, where am I going here? When you've got damage to the outer hair cells, you have lost the sharpening of the traveling wave. So you can't distinguish between frequencies close together anymore because your traveling waves are now rounded. So you can't tell the difference between this frequency here and this frequency here. Whereas this guy can, because his traveling wave is pointed. So he can distinguish between frequencies close together. So that makes two reasons why people and hearing aids mix like oil and water. One, upward spread of masking. Two, it's because the traveling waves become more dull and rounded with outer hair cell damage. And outer hair cell damage occurs before inner hair cell damage. Outer hair cells help inner hair cells pick up soft sounds, but outer hair cells are the moving part. And because they are always moving, and I wonder if I have that picture in this particular section. I've got 5 more minutes and I'll use them. Okay? And I'm not sure if I've got it, but I might. You never know. Here, there you go. Look at the motion. Because the outer hair cells are the moving part, they die first. They're the moving part. Your speakers are going to go first. Your CD player is going to go first, okay, because it's the moving part. The moving part. Look at how the outer hair cells shrink, pulling the tectorial membrane down so that these inner hairs can get sheared. When there's enough intensity to create enough fluid motion, these hairs can get bent by themselves by the motion of fluid. But you know what? With sounds that are really soft, they need the action of these outer hair cells to pull that membrane down to shear those inner hair cells. So a dull, passive traveling wave with damage to these outer hair cells, traveling waves look like this. They look like von Beckesy's cadavers. They look like the traveling waves in dead people. Okay, dull and round. They're there. Okay, the highs, lows will stimulate near the apex. Highs would stimulate near the base. You'll get all the stuff I showed you, but it's only when you've got healthy outer hair cells that you've got that A, amplitude, and B, sharpening. Okay, so again, I sign off here now saying the 2 reasons why people hate hearing aids: upward spread of masking and the loss of the sharpening of the traveling wave that's done by the outer hair cells. We will talk more about that specific aspect, the sharpening of the outer hair cells or of the traveling waves, next week. So next week we continue on in Unit 6, cochlear or inner ear physiology. It's been a slice. This has been a healthy introduction. We've made a good headway into it, and we'll finish this unit next week. All right. Adios. How are you doing, Richard?
You still there?
Yeah, I am. Yep.
Oh, okay. I'm just gonna let you know my video is not working for some reason. I'll figure it out. But this has been pretty enlightening because it's kind of sheer. It kind of brought it all together, so I kind of understand it a little bit better now.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that. Yep. And if anybody has any questions, I invite people to A, phone me, or B, email me. I check my OTC emails every day. Okay, it's venomat@otc.edu. And the home phone number is 604-492-1013. Cell phone 250-661-9707. Here to help. So, but when people watch Zoom sessions, I encourage you to watch them twice. Okay, because courses are normally 3 hours a week. And a Zoom session is 1 hour long. So if somebody watches a Zoom session once, now you may do okay, but I suggest watching it twice. You know why? I know it takes time, but you've then put in 2 hours. And you're watching a movie a second time, you get way more out of it than watching it the first time. So yeah, that is a huge thing that I meant, that I've always thought, but I say that about any of the courses, especially acoustics. Watch it twice, okay? Because you'll get way more out of it. Anyway, thanks for showing up there, Richard. At least you did. You're my hero for the day. I will sign off here, and I got one more Zoom session to teach in about an hour from now. That's a second-year course, 240. So it's been a slice.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll stop recording right here.